friends. Good
Good
morning,
morning.
good
morning.
afternoon, good
Hello.
evening from all over the Micronesia, and it seems from some of the other Pacific islands as well as beyond the Pacific. I see that there are friends from Palau, from both Koror and Nardmau. We see friends from Yap, from the Baha'i Center, the beautiful Baha'i Center in Colonia, as well as from other places in Yap. We see that there are friends from all over the Mariana Islands. And we also see that's Saipan and Guam. We see that there are friends from Chuuk. We see that there are friends from Pohnpei and from the Marshall Islands, from Majuro, from Kwajalein, from throughout Micronesia. But we also see our dear extended family from Micronesia and the Pacific who now live in other parts of the world. I see my own parents on as well. So that's wonderful. And I see we have Gary Clegg. We see our dear Nadia, who lived in Papua New Guinea and Tonga, who's now in very cold Minnesota, who's with us with her beautiful son. We see friends from all over, from Melbourne, Australia, from Oklahoma, in the middle of the United States. And I'm sure there are others that I'm missing here, friends. So welcome everyone. This is a very exciting gathering that we're all coming together to welcome Mr. Dunbar to our part of the Pacific. And Mr. Dunbar is appropriately dressed. He's wearing his island shirt as well. So big round of applause for Mr. Dunbar. I will introduce him in a second, friends. But we're going to have some prayers first. We're going to start with Palau, and I'm going to ask dear Anissa to chant for us in Palauan. We're going to go from the most west island to the easternmost island. So we'll start in Palau, and then we'll go to Yap, and the Baha'is in the Baha'i Center of Yap with all the wonderful children are going to sing for us a beautiful hidden word in the language of Satawal, one of the outer islands of Yap. Yap has many islands, and this is one of the most eastern islands. And then we'll turn to the Mariana Islands, and we'll have dear Jenny say a prayer in Chamorro. And then we will have a prayer in Marshallese from all the dear youth that are gathered in Sultan's house. We see you there. And we will have all the youth in Marshall's chant for us as well. So we'll have 4 different languages, prayers in 4 different languages. So welcome, friends. So Anissa, we'll go ahead and start. Again, friends, welcome to this gathering. And welcome to Mr. Dunbar for joining us, and welcome to all the friends from around the world. There are 46 people, 46 connections, much more than 46 people, but 46 connections right now to this Zoom call. So we're going to start with devotions.
Oh, the swap. Oh, the swap. Oh, Dios, Mokralak Yemom Ali, Ranga, Emelakan Mumbidi, Loldi, Erolia, Tu, Kayamesisi, Emo, Raklisi, Yang. Atubaha.
ojuosu, na fandania y corazón todo, y sen bentenmo, za una family ni donkulun intentionmo nusia. Sinya mohon umatatizi sia, y tenangomo za un consigi sia gi arreglamo. O Dios, ayuda todos sia, ni mana kekensinya motna, za noi loqui ni minat good na un masatbi. O Dios, sakmo dumidingo sia na maisa, giha pinat kotniha motna, ni candid itiningomo, za na magov I corazoniha, ni guinaizamu. Gof magahe, hagui ajudanti zan niha.
Friends from the Marshall Islands? I don't know if you're muted. The friends in the Marshalls are having power issues today in the Marshall Islands, so let's hope we've not lost them. Marcin, maybe we have the bounty of having you, Marcin, say a Marshallese prayer for us.
Okay. Wanich. Emoli jo warrior. Bung parigri man hauram. Kachida country amuam por an maramwalak tak yung chedap king. Kalat im kajanala wear can chose moleam. O Euroch. Kubai im cabin pro pendron. Kubai geri line man. Im kajur chedap kuban kale or rokajar. Kanam chuan one. O Euroch. Kaman pe meskin ran ronagalok kan nara minchuan modam. Kagajur murun rijar barrinam ilo ay cherabal ilo ay nangam. O Euroch. O irgabajer triamo ay chalok chamalagan. O Eurojin chalok per. Chalok per. Nalalok likijap kwan. Im kaman pe kamino ko da was manailing triamo am. O warre ailun narong kajur am. Humbaririk iman no ko da ko am im katay kem iman menin kamol ko am. O Eurojanich. Kaman per kamino iwan no ko non chuan no malo. Udko ilo chicken kaldum ko. Pay kuba im chuan one. Nurut pendron kan chojim nyawam. O Euroch. Kanuran pun ko kan kakalay chuan mo da am. Im kaman pay arami jodem jej. Ranin mo di yugoro ranag dog chen chuan mo do dej. Inay bo yuj. Emol len wajigay ko roy pen rajet regilo wajigay nuram. Emol kokajur patata. Yo nur kenin nagi. Riledo. Rijolak per. Rijolak sharawi. Ngayon peris ko dem jej. Iyo what chuan ragaman.
Thank you, Marcin. And thank you, friends from across Micronesia, for offering those wonderful prayers. It's my great bounty now to introduce very briefly, since I don't want to take time away, very briefly, Mr. Hooper Dunbar, a dear friend to many of you, no doubt. And those of you who've met him personally, or those of you who've met him online and been so inspired and guided by so much of his wonderful sharing that is now on YouTube for the benefit of so many of the friends from around the world. Friends, Mr. Dunbar, as a young man in Los Angeles, found his way to a home of some Baha'is and started learning about the Baha'i faith as a teenager. And he was a budding actor. I shouldn't say budding actor. He had actually some credits under his belt, and soon fell in love with the Baha'i faith and arose to travel and pioneer to Central America, Nicaragua, and the Mosquito Coast in particular, where he began to share this message that he found with others. And that's where this journey, this very long journey of his, began at the age of 18 or 19 as a pioneer in the 1950s. I had the great bounty of meeting him about 33 years ago. And when I was on a year of service in Haifa, Israel, which is the world center of the Baha'i faith, where both the holy shrines of the Baha'is. The shrine of the Bab and Baha'u'llah are there, but also the administrative center of the faith is in Haifa, Israel. And Hooper Dunbar was at the time serving in administration at the World Center in the office of the International Teaching Center as an international counselor. And like so many youth before me, he took me under his wing and began to encourage me and guide me in studying and deeply throwing myself into the revelation of Baha'u'llah. And over the past 33 years, he has continued to guide and support and inspire and encourage me throughout my life. And so this is a great bounty for me personally to welcome him to our neck of the woods. He has really had this great desire to come to the Pacific, to all the Pacific Islands for some time. And now that he has retired after 20 years of service on the Universal House of Justice, the governing body of the Baha'i world, and he is retired in Northern California, he has made some travels, and he did come to Hawaii a couple years ago. So that was his first venture into the Pacific, but he's also hoping after COVID opens up to come to other islands in Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. So friends, I want to hand it over to Hooper Dunbar, but also I want to again welcome everyone. I'm looking at all the dear faces from across the region. We have the dear mayor of Tumuning, one of the central villages of Guam, joining us. We have students from the University of Guam. We have friends and family and neighbors from all our communities throughout Micronesia joining us today. And I really welcome you. And I'm sure after Mr. Dunbar's remarks, we'll have some opportunities to ask some questions and to further this discussion a little bit about the Baha'i faith and about Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. So I really welcome Mr. Dunbar to our Zoom gathering this morning, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kirk. Very kind. Kirk, we have to thank Kirk for having arranged this visit to you, a virtual visit, really, but the miracles of the time we live in are allowing us to connect in new ways all over the world and renew friendships and make new friendships and see each other at least on these small little squares where I see you all now. It's a pleasure to greet you. I think most of you have heard a lot about the Baha'i faith and have embraced its teachings and have drawn close to your maker through the things that Baha'u'llah has given us. We live in a very strange time. The master warned, he said that the forces of darkness were invading the world, and they were very sharp in their actions in attacking the light. And somehow through efforts of different people and our own lower natures, much of the inspiration that existed and was latent in the human race has been driven out of them, driven out of the people. The forces of darkness are prevailing, the negation that there is a God even. I mean, I think a couple of centuries ago, it was unheard of that people would imagine that there's no God, that they didn't know him, that they didn't understand him. That was clear, but that there was no God, that there was no creator, that here was a creation and there was no creator, it was unheard of. And Shoghi Effendi said that this is a fashion, this negation of God and its materialistic outlook, and that in the future the pendulum will swing, and then people will find it very odd, and you would be ashamed to admit that you had some doubt about the existence of a creator. It will come back. We're moving out of this darkness. The tests that we're having, the various trials that come to us both individually and collectively at this present period in mankind are accelerating the process of the disintegration of society. I want to find, someone sent me a quote from the Advent this morning. I wanted to share this with you just because it gives us a feeling of what's going on. This is words of the guardian, the beloved guardian. He says, as the lights of liberty flicker and go out, as the din of discord grows louder and louder every day, as the fires of fanaticism flame with increasing fierceness in the breasts of men, as the chill of irreligion creeps relentlessly over the soul of mankind, the limbs and organs that constitute the body of the faith of Baha'u'llah appear in varying measure to have become afflicted with the crippling influence that now hold in their grip the whole of the civilized world. He's very clearly warned us that we fall under the influence of this materialism ourselves. And that this is, he used to say to the pilgrims, Shoghi used to say to the pilgrims that this is the most dangerous enemy that the cause of God has in the world is materialism. Because it creates other goals than spiritual goals. It makes material goals, and then our happiness and our success are all being measured in terms of how much wealth we have, how many clothes we have, all those properties that we own, all these different things that are meant for our well-being, but they're not meant to come between us and God. And we have this glorious message, which is freeing people from the constraints of materialism. And each time we say a prayer, we attract and open ourselves to some of the emanation of the divine spirit of the cause that's shining forth from the light of Baha'u'llah. It encompasses all mankind, he tells us. We need to be with ourselves and with our friends quite clear about explaining very simple things, like the fact that God has sent messengers down through the ages. And of course, people in the Pacific are more familiar with Abraham and Moses and Christ, that in this day he's sent another messenger promised by those previous messengers of God. All of them confirmed the messenger that came before and also announced the coming of future messengers. And all of them have made references to the greatness of this day of God, which Baha'u'llah connects with becoming grown up, with growing up, with maturity of the human race. He says we've come through progressive stages of infancy and childhood and youth, what you're calling these days junior youth and youth themselves. Each stage has been characterized by certain qualities. The quality of youth is a certain restlessness and rebellion at established order. Eventually we'll come to finally to the mature recognition, which is what Baha'u'llah has said is the healing of the nations now. The recognition of the oneness and wholeness of the human race. He said it to us, we've heard it, it has to absorb and vibrate in our beings. We are the leaves of one tree. We're all living by the sap of the tree and by the light of the sun. We are the fruit of one branch. We're all, he says, we've created you all from the same dust. Why have we done that? So that no one may exalt themselves. No one may presume that they're greater than anybody else. We're all made of the same dirt, so to speak, the same dust. And God views us as his creation. He tells us that we're in this world for just a short period of time, relatively, and we should prepare ourselves spiritually to go to the next life. And he gives us the prayers, he gives us obligatory prayers, he gives us the hidden words. He guides us so that we might turn stage by stage, step by step, and embrace the message that God has sent us. It's his gift to us. It's his bounty to us. It's his mercy to us. It's his grace from him to enable us to transcend all of our suffering and all of our difficulties. And when we do that, we can become a source of attraction, a magnet to attract other souls. And when we're in our collective activities and our community activities, and we have this attraction in our hearts to Baha'u'llah, it attracts us to each other as well. As the Master says, it becomes light upon light. And that interaction of the light between us is a terrific force for other people to see. Whenever disunity or criticism enters into the Baha'i community, the effect of that unity is diminished or canceled. And Abdu'l-Baha says we cannot grow if we don't have unity. So that this call is not only to the Baha'is, it's to all mankind. Unite and you will attract the bounties of God. It's so interesting, back in 1912, Abdu'l-Baha was in America, and he had a letter, a communication from an American woman, and he answered her talking about the greatness of the time we live in, how different it is from previous centuries. You think about previous centuries, all kinds of people, geniuses and likewise, were trying to figure out how we could fly, for example. It was such a elusive goal, something that we wanted to attain to. And Abdu'l-Baha said that because this is the day of God, a special day of God, a special consummation, again, of the character of growing up, of becoming mature, of becoming adults, of using all of our intellectual, creative, and spiritual powers to live in the world, to help the world, to serve the world. He says, through all of these steps and this life of unity with each other, we attract the blessings of God, and that will gradually train our souls and teach us how to lift the veil, which Baha'u'llah repeatedly mentions in prayers and in so many tablets, lift the veils between us and him. The two veils that he mentions are love of self, ego, love of that we think we're better than everybody else. And if I don't love myself, who's going to love me? You hear this very popular kind of philosophy these days. And the other is passion, carnal passion mainly, to be very blunt, sexual passion. These are the two veils, the things that constantly are humbugging us and attracting our attention. They're different in different stages of our life, but we are constantly in our prayers. He gives us words to say, to ask us to remove us from the constraints of these veils so that we can see him, and there in him, the image of God that shines through him. We can see the purpose of life. We can see and discover those treasures which he says he has deposited, that God has deposited within the soul of each one of us. That those are like marvelous seeds that if we feed them with recitation of the words of God, with meditation, with study of the writings, with the use of prayers, those seeds will start to blossom within our soul, and we will become the recipients of knowledge and understanding that we couldn't have before. Now, in this tablet that Abdu'l-Baha wrote to this lady, the American lady, years ago, he said, because of the greatness of Baha'u'llah's cause, this world will attract to the degree possible the bounties and wonders of the other realm, of the kingdom of God on high. And wonders will appear. Now, friends, just from the time that Baha'u'llah declared his mission until now, what a transformation in the life of human society. Abdu'l-Baha said, you'll see those powers of the kingdom appear here gradually in different ways. And of course, then we had the telephone, and we had, we have this virtual connection with each other. And he foresaw that in this very tablet. He said, the time will come when anyone, anywhere on the face of the earth will be able to speak face to face with anyone else whenever they want. The Baha'is were so startled. The ones that saw this, they said, we can't show this to anybody. This is madness. How can you be everywhere at once, seeing everybody at the same time? This is impossible. Now, I remember in the mid-90s, one of the scholars at the World Center had found this, and one of the House members brought it to the meeting, and they read it out in the meeting. Oh, now we were already at the beginning then of iPhones all over the world. It's gotten stronger now. Now suddenly Zoom has taken this new character so that not only do we see anyone, we see lots of people all at the same time. It's an extraordinary step. Also, the wonder of flight. It seems like we fly around a lot in the next world. With wings or without wings, I don't know how that all works. He says if we understood the next world, we wouldn't accept to live one more day in this world. And that's why it's veiled from us, Baha'u'llah says. It is not appropriate to reveal its character here. We have certain things, we're like in a pressure cooker here. We have to continue to be under that pressure in order to develop those qualities we need to be able to dwell in the next realm. If you look carefully at the writings of the holy books, you see all kinds of references to the next world. Just it's likened to this world in a sense because we can't really understand the spiritual nature of it. It's no time and space, so it can't be described in terms of time and space, although it's clear that there's sequence of activities. There's continuity of existence, but it's not marked by day and night or by the coming and going of sunlight and the different things that we experience in this life. And we're not constrained by space. Now, Baha'u'llah describes that God is the God of the whole universe, and there's no limit to the universe. When you look up at the stars, you realize somebody will tell you that light has taken, I don't know how many billions of years to go from that star to come to that star into your eye. Well, that's kind of difficult for us to understand. But then he says that the God who's created and maintains and sustains and blesses and nurtures that whole creation, you can't fit him in your little understanding that we have. And so God, in his great mercy and kindness, has created the lamps of the manifestations and messengers of God to deliver his will to us, to express his word to us, to reveal those verses which are the great cure for everything that's the matter with us. The remembrance of God is the healer of all thine ills, he says. This remembrance comes when we read the verses of God. Very important in that it are the hidden words that Abdu'l-Baha says we should read every day, and indeed we should try to memorize them. These thoughts are the eternal content of the revelations of God of the past, and Baha'u'llah has made them brief and renewed them now and given them to us. How can we deprive ourselves of such a blessing? Also, the marvelous obligatory prayers that he's given us, of which you can choose. When you say, well, you know, the long one, that's very long. What is it, friends? Out of 24 hours, it would be 12 minutes, 10 or 12 minutes. That's not a terrible amount of time. If you haven't experimented with that, and to show these prayers to others, because these are gifts from God to all mankind. So he said the two faith are obligatory prayer and fasting. When you get to the verses in the most holy book where Baha'u'llah commands fasting, he says, "O people of the world, we have ordained a fast for you." He doesn't say, "Oh, Baha'is of the world." He says, "Oh, people." In other words, God is making it incumbent upon the whole human race. You can share the idea of fasting with your friends in the time of the fast and say, "You're welcome to join in," and you'll see what difference it makes in our lives and so on. So this is quite what we want to be sure that we communicate to people. Baha'u'llah says, "Proclaim my cause unceasingly, always." When I was a new Baha'i, the friends told me that Abdu'l-Baha had said when he was here in California that if you're going to see a person once, deliver the message. If you're going to see them more than one time, live the Baha'i life. Attract them through love, because you'll be seeing them every day. Maybe they're your new neighbor or something. But somebody standing in the subway with you, or on a bus, or on a cart somewhere that you may not see again, you want to deliver the message. Now, what is the message? The message is that God exists and he speaks to mankind from age to age through chosen messengers. And we have a new messenger, and his name is Baha'u'llah, and he brings the remedy for all the illnesses that the world is presently suffering from, and a plan how to move forward to establish the kingdom of God on earth. All right. Now, the response to that is sometimes, "That's very interesting. I want to know more about that." And Baha'u'llah says, if they show interest, then teach them. In other words, this first delivery of the message is to let them know such a thing exists. They then have to take the step to want to know about it, to know more about it. And it's when they're not interested and when we still want to tell them that it becomes proselytizing. Otherwise, proselytizing, what is the new message of God? Somebody has to tell them. Somebody needs to assume this responsibility. Baha'u'llah says we've left it to the poor in the world, to the souls, we being among the poor, to propagate the faith of God all over the planet, and therefore participate in the role that the manifestation of God is played in the beginning. Imagine that. He says people who arise now and true believers and proclaim the cause and teach the cause, he said they have attained to the station of the lesser prophets of the house of Israel. How is that? It's an amazing thing. But then when you think that our dear Baha'i friends and pioneers who've gone to different islands and different towns and all these villages that you have around you, the one that takes it there first has a very special position and bounty. And so many of you have been engaged in the spreading of this message, and you have so many friends everywhere. This is a terrific treasure stored up for the future. Now, you can imagine of these different bounties of the kingdom that are appearing in the world progressively with the growth of sciences and the life of devoted believers everywhere. We don't know what's ahead. Every year, they say now, every day there's more scientific discoveries than there were in centuries in the past. Such a bursting forth of knowledge. Abdu'l-Baha promises us that if we're faithful to the teachings, we try to obey them and manage to maintain our humility, that great knowledge will come to us, that the spirit of faith is the source of learning and knowledge. Most of the people are living off of borrowed knowledge they've heard from a neighbor or from somebody else. We have the chance of going to the Word of God, to the teachings of God ourselves, and we want to share those with others, make them know they exist, and share them. One of the means for the spread of the cause, as not all the Baha'is, when people who become Baha'is at the beginning have a clear concept of how they can actually arise as teachers. So you know that in the communities now we have institute courses and we have books, a series of books to help us to address our collective responsibilities as communities to grow and to serve those around us and to attract them into a unified community setting. This is a new pioneering effort, if you will, of the last 25, 30 years. And I'm sure many of you are engaged in that, in this process in one way or another. For this collective activity that we do all together, to be effective, we have to bring the strength of our own knowledge of God, of our own acknowledgement of the role of Baha'u'llah in our lives. So as individuals, there is a call to us as individuals in the faith, and there's a call to us as communities in the faith. The call of us to individual is we have to learn to know and worship God. And therefore we need to be surrounded by these divine teachings. I know Shoghi Effendi has said that the book of Baha'u'llah's writings that he collected and translated himself, the Gleanings, should be the constant companion of every faithful believer. You don't want to wander far away from that book. You want to have it close to you. And he said through prayers and meditations, he hoped the Baha'is, the believers who have heard of the faith and draw close to it, may draw close to Baha'u'llah through these prayers and meditations, so that he may draw nigh unto them. This is another facet or expression of love me that I may love thee. If thou lovest me not, my love can in no wise reach thee. And this is the character of this world where he calls us, he speaks to us, he tells us truths. We have no way to prove them physically or materially, but they affect our being. They attract us inside. And if the confirmations have touched us, then we can pass them on to others, and that attracts and sets their soul aglow. And then they can pass that into the activity and understanding of their family and of their friends. And we are the conveyors of this. And Abdu'l-Baha says the greatest gift we have is the gift of teaching. How can we deprive ourselves of it, he said. The fact that you can open your lips at the command of Baha'u'llah and tell someone that never heard of Baha'u'llah that he exists, that God has not left us to ourselves in this day, but he has delivered a message which is capable of transforming humanity and changing the face of the planet. Meanwhile, all the lights are going out, and so hopefully our message of light and peace will be more and more attractive in the midst of the difficulties people are facing. And so those of you who may not have heard of this message, I hope that you will inquire about it, inform yourself. I think it's a duty that if we hear such a thing, that we don't just dismiss it as a superstition or because of one of our prejudices. That would be tragic. That would be like the Jews and the Pharisees in the time of Christ, negating Christ without investigating, without going to see him, without listening to his teachings, without understanding what he was about. We'd be in the same position. Baha'u'llah is very strong about this. He says, whoever denies this revelation, this teaching from God, has denied all the messengers of the past. Why is that? It said, you know, in the Gospels, it says that the sheep know the voice of the shepherd. If you're a true believer in any one of the religions of mankind, you should be able to make the transfer to accept Baha'u'llah. You may have some tripping about a bit, and it may take a while to inform yourself sufficiently so that you can recognize the fruit that Baha'u'llah has brought. But that's the challenge that we're offering to all of our friends and acquaintances. Take up the challenge. Inform yourselves till you understand that this is the truth, or you decide to negate it. This is the wonder of this life we're in. We're given a free will so that we can choose. Otherwise, God is certainly capable of making us all puppets and make us to do whatever he wants us to do. He is all powerful. But he doesn't do that. He subtly issues his message in such a way and leaves it to us to respond. And if we do respond, he pours his bounties on us and his grace on us and gives us the opportunity to impart this message and share these fragrances in the world with other people. You're dispersed all over this great ocean. I hope you're protected somewhat from the pandemic problems that are challenging, and that you're able to associate with each other still. And I stay in touch with Kirk and try to receive news of your activities, of your sacrifices, of those efforts that you're making to share the grace of Baha'u'llah with more and more people. Kirk, let some of the friends say whatever they like to say. That's good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. This is such wonderful thoughts, so inspiring and thought-provoking, and I'm sure the friends have some thoughts to share and maybe even some questions to ask. I want to just begin by sharing that my relationship with Mr. Dunbar actually began with a question. When I was 19 years old and I was a gardener at the Baha'i World Center, one weekend afternoon, there were a couple cars going down to Tel Aviv for roller skating. And I managed to squeeze into one of these cars uninvited. And we went down to Tel Aviv and we had 2 hours of roller skating. And then exhausted, we all went outside and sat on the beach of the Mediterranean. And I saw Mr. Dunbar starting to walk. One of the cars was his car. And he started to walk on the beach by the water a bit. And I ran up and started walking next to him. And he knew my parents. He had visited my family in India and he was asking about my parents. And then he said, and asking about also my service and how I was doing and things like this. And then he asked a question and he said, Kirk, do you know what the first valley is? And I didn't know what he was talking about. And that began our relationship. And that began this journey of him accompanying me to throw myself into this ocean of Baha'u'llah's revelation and appreciate more each day how impactful and transformative it is for my life. So friends, we now have the opportunity to open it up a little bit, and I want to call on the friends from throughout our islands here in Micronesia. And I maybe thought I could put a couple people on the spot at first, if they're okay with this. I'm gonna ask dear Audrey Meno from Guam, if she's paying attention and is able to ask a question. Audrey, are you available?
Sure. I don't
Okay.
know yet what. Let me see. Can I think about it?
Sure,
And then
sure.
I'll
come back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Audrey's a former student of mine, so she knows about being put on the spot. Friends, I don't know how we want to do this, whether you have your hands up or say it in the chat. Who would like to ask a question so we don't all ask at once? Who has a thought they want to share or a question they want to offer for exploration? Feel free, friends. Because if you don't, I'm going to start calling on you. And oh, I see Brian. I see Brian. Brian's hands up. Thank you. There are 3 screens here, so I'm going through the 3 screens. Yes, Brian, go ahead. Take yourself off mute.
Okay. Well, Alawa Pa, Palau, Marshall Islands, Yap, all over. Oh my gosh. And Alawa Pa, Mr. Dunbar. We actually visited you in your at your place northeast of Sacramento with Nabil Wessel, my son, who was going to Stanford. Anyway,
actually, hold on. I want to interrupt Brian. Okay. Brian is one person that's actually lived in all of these islands. He began in the Marshall Islands, then he moved to the Caroline Islands, and then he moved to the Mariana Islands, and now he's still he had a time in California and in the United States, and he's back in the Caroline Islands, in the Mariana Islands. So Brian has this kind of interesting perspective of life in all of these different islands, and he's married to a gorgeous woman from the most eastern of our islands, from Kiribati. And so he's got a very interesting perspective in life. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. So, you know, I wanted to ask the question about the first valley, Kirk. And I'm just going to say, Kirk, do you know what the first valley is? And also, Mr. Dunbar, I was just hoping if you could explain, how can we get out of the first valley and head to all those other valleys? Sometimes it seems like we're stuck or always get put back in that first valley and we want to keep going, the valley of knowledge. And anyway, I just throw a humorous one, but I'm also curious. And Kirk, what is the First Valley, man?
When he asked me this question 33 years ago, he said that when I'm 85, I'll tell you the answer. So he hasn't told me the answer yet. So I'm still searching. I'm still in search mode.
You know, we went through a process of reviewing the previous translation and had, so many expert translators looking at this and making suggestions back and forth. And one of the ways that Shoghi Effendi has translated the word sabr is fortitude. And I was greatly attracted that the state of this valley is fortitude rather than patience. Patience seems passive, non-active. Fortitude is you just keep going on despite the fact that you don't have the answer. You haven't found the object of your search yet. So I think we should consider that as a dimension, though the word remains still patience. The steed of the valley of search is patience. And that's the answer to Brian too. I think when are we going to get out of it? Now, in the writings, the House of Justice put a preface to the, I've forgotten the name, the translation of the name of the book of Baha'u'llah that contains a description. It's a copy very similar to the Igan, but it's in Arabic. It's been referred to by Baha'u'llah in the Igan as it's kind of like an Arabic Igan. And it's been published in, do you remember the name of this? I'm sorry, just
is that
my senior.
the Gems of Divine Virtue?
The gems of
Divine Mysteries.
Divine Mysteries. Okay. That goes through, a parallel set of valleys and cities in the case of this particular work. But the House of Justice has quoted in the preface, the introduction, which they have approved be inserted into the volume, quotes from a tablet of Baha'u'llah where he says that anyone that's recognized my revelation has already passed the 7 valleys. Oh, I think there's, of course, aspects to that we would want to weigh, but it's the recognition of Baha'u'llah, it vaults you into another universe, so to speak. You look that up in the book and you can see where it says that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Dunbar, we have a couple of thoughts being expressed in the chat. One thought that Audrey shared was that, Audrey, do you want to share it verbally by yourself? Would you like to?
Sure. I guess a question for everyone that we can reflect on is thinking about what lessons do island communities reveal to us about unity? And my thought was, it's like ironic how, when you think of an island, it's a lone body of land mass. But when you think about the communities in these island communities, they have to come together to thrive. And then even just thinking about neighboring islands, you can see an island that is separated by water, but our neighboring islands, we're known to sail to each other and share, and that's how we're connected. And that's just, something like, it's ironic because you can think it's alone, but really there's so much unity even within the island communities.
Thank you, Audrey. Yeah, this question about unity that is so central in the teachings of Baha'u'llah is something, a concept and a value that is so fundamental to Pacific Island reality, Pacific Island sustainability. And so if Mr. Dunbar wants to reflect a little bit about this concept of unity and how it really applies to island communities that that are really founded on this principle, but sometimes even in the modern world, we struggle with this because we're being torn apart through different kinds of social forces.
Yes. Well, we're having, the Baha'is all over the world are having a challenge with such fast changing circumstances, especially the social circumstances. Too many people get attracted into thinking there's a political solution at the national level. The Guardian warned the Baha'is to not enter into political partisanship activities of any sort. This doesn't mean we're not informed. We don't inform ourselves. We don't understand things. We don't have our own opinions, but we don't share them. And he wrote a letter of guidance to the guides at the house of worship in Wilmette. And he said they should never mention the name of political leaders at all. Never mention their names. If somebody refers them, okay, we acknowledge, but we don't express an opinion. And then people may come at us and say, well, how can you do that? You're shirking your responsibilities as a citizen. And our response to that is that the politics of today and the solutions at a national level, irrespective of what's happening in other neighboring countries and so on, is not conducive to peace and the progress of humanity. And that the Baha'is have international solutions, and we concentrate on propagating and explaining and interpreting those international positions. This is essential, it's very important. So that would naturally happen. I don't know if the politics of the islands out there, I'm sure is complex, but the message of the oneness of mankind is kind of the antidote for that. That by forming political parties, so much of the politics of this last century has been divisive, as the Guardian, those words that I read earlier, the forces of division have been used by political forces. They try to make opposing parties so that they can gather followers and have influence and so on. It's nowhere to go. It's not going to solve anything. Again, you know, he says, Baha'u'llah talks about rolling up the old world order. Shoghi Effendi says, the new civilization, the world civilization, will be built upon the ashes of the old world order. Do you want to fix it before it burns down? I don't know. What's the point? It doesn't work. It doesn't happen. So this is some interesting things, I think, to reflect on in that area.
Mr. Dunbar, we have a question from Kim Sabeti from the island of Guam. Kim?
Hi, Mr. Dunbar, Alafa, everyone. I wanted to ask, in my teachings and my experience, when we teach the friends here and family on the island, they can easily accept the oneness of mankind, the oneness of religion, and the oneness of God, right? Oneness of God, the three oneness, easy for them to accept. And so we say that, okay, the Baha'is, they believe that they're all one, right? The unity. Then what do we have to accept Baha'u'llah, right? If they believe that we are all one, right? If they are the same, if they are all the same, then why do we have to accept this new manifestation? Of course, in our teachings, I try to explain the elevated theme on humanity's coming of age, about
yes,
Baha'u'llah's revelation is for today. It will solve the problems of today, whereas the religions of the past, many thousands of years ago, will not solve the problems of today, right? The teachings. but I was hoping maybe you can expound on it more. If you could talk a little bit more about it, because it always comes up. Why should we accept the Baha'i faith if we are all one?
Well, I think you've started very clearly on the answer, that the fact is that because the social teachings of the previous revelations don't match the needs of the time we live in. I mean, Christ, was he going to talk about global unity? That earth was flat when he came. It's all changed. The way the world is viewed, we didn't even know the wholeness of the mankind. That combined with the magic term progressive revelation. In other words, that it is because it is the teaching of these prophets that have come, that are all one, as they're ready to recognize. Each one confirms the previous one and announces a future one. And that future one then announces another future one, and so on until we get to Baha'u'llah. And his voice, it's a singular voice. If you recognize that the voice of the inner voice of the manifestation of God is one voice, they all seated on the same throne, proclaim the same faith, soar in the same heaven. You know the verses from the Egon. That therefore, why not embrace them all? Why? What would be the point in sticking with only one when we have the advantage of now embracing and understanding the unity and wholeness and consecutive character of all these revelations? This is one of the wonders of Baha'u'llah, is he's uniting the religions. He's uniting us all. It's under a new community, the community of the Most Great Name. But this is a unification of the religions of the past. And that's what we're called on to do, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunbar.
There's a question on the screen here.
Yes.
In this chat. Did you see that? If you might like to comment on this, I would be most interested in one of your recorded talks. You said, Abdul said, this world is not reality, but actually the dream is reality. Since we each must wake up to this world after a night's sleep, then isn't this world real? How should we understand this, please? I don't know. How should we, first we have to understand the question. It seems complex in itself.
Carl, maybe Carl wants to elaborate. Carl, would you like to explain a little bit more?
I'm not sure I can say much more. I found that comment to be really interesting when I was listening to that recorded talk. And I know Baha'u'llah says that the dream is actually evidence of the possibility of a continued existence after we give up our body when we die. But I always thought since we wake up in the morning and we see the world around us, that this is reality because we always come back to it. But the dreams we have at night, they're always changing, and sometimes they show us things that happen in the future, or help us to understand things that happened in the day. But I don't see that as having the same kind of reality. So I don't know if Mr. Dunbar remembers that comment, but that's.
No, I think you're quite right. We have a perception of reality. We're not sure. The nature of dreams is not always that they are a reality in themselves. They have a greater reality in some senses than our normal daily activities. And sometimes we have really transcendent visions. Abdu'l-Baha says 3 kinds of dreams. One is the result of nervous activity during the day, where you keep doing at night in your dream, endlessly doing your homework, or endlessly breaking peas out of pods, or whatever it is, happen to have been mechanical work or anything that you've been doing. You continue doing it at night and it's totally exhausting. That's one kind of nervous dream. Then he said, there's another dream, which is all symbolism. Everything is in symbols. And he said that for that, you need an interpreter. You need to understand, he even mentions ancient books that, and people who know how to read what different things in dreams mean. And then he said, there's a third kind of dream. And he says that's real. This is this idea of reality, where you see the manifestations of God, or you see Abdul Baha, or you see some event of importance that later on actually comes into this world, which wasn't here previously, but you've seen it in a dream. So it has some reality that transcends this reality. It doesn't mean to demean the activities in the world. It's our means of spiritual progress, that we live in this realm and that we face the different challenges and tests that we have. So I think it's a very thoughtful question. I think you have to think it through through reading about the different parts, aspects about dreams that you can find in the writings, I think. I was thinking of the previous question, but I hadn't realized that this screen had moved up. It says that the Dido Guam community is posting the weekly talks about the writings of Shoghi Effendi. Can you comment on the purpose of these talks? I think if you'll go back to some of the early talks in the series now, of which there are now 19, you'll see that that's been clearly stated from the Guardian. I'll read the sentence. He says that he's talking about the need he sees for setting forth certain truths which lie at the basis of our faith. And it is our first duty to guard the integrity of these verities, of these truths. He says, I'm convinced that powerfully reinforce the vigor of our spiritual life and greatly assist in counteracting the machinations of an implacable and vigilant enemy. And then he adds this, he says, to strive to obtain a more adequate understanding of the significance of Baha'u'llah's stupendous revelation must, it is my unalterable conviction, remain the first obligation and the object of the constant endeavor of each one of its loyal adherents. Then he tells us how difficult it is to have a thorough knowledge of so vast a system, so sublime a revelation, so sacred a trust. But still, he said, it's our bounden duty to seek fresh inspiration and added sustenance as we labor for the propagation of the faith by a consideration of these verities. And he says, it's this book, this message, the dispensation of Baha'u'llah, that contains his review of the essential verities and the position of each of the three central figures. A very important document for the Baha'is to, in my estimation, for them to weigh and ponder and think about. And it's good to see that there are a number of people that seem to feel the same and are reading along and studying those and asking questions related to them. I'm just glad I can sit here on my duff, so to speak, and not travel around, which is always was difficult to go flying every place, and be able to speak to so many people through this medium. This is a gift that we have. Let us all prepare ourselves to talk to others about the faith through Zoom.
Friends, this letter from the Guardian to the Baha'is of the West, called the Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, that Mr. Dunbar is referring to, many of you have studied many times in your own communities and your own private study as well as community study. And it is one of those early documents that Mr. Dunbar studied with the youth as well, with every cohort of youth that served at the World Center. because it is so central to the essential verities, to an understanding of the essential verities. You know, friends, Mr. Dunbar, all his life has had this kind of soft spot in his heart for young people. And there's so many young people on this Zoom call from all the different islands. And I want to really encourage you to feel free and not to feel shy to ask a question, no matter what the question is. So I want to ask we have youth that are on the Zoom session from Palau and from Yap. That's right, friends from Yap, are you paying attention? All the youth are there. The children have laid down now, that's good. And the youth are now paying attention in the background, you can see. Fiona maybe has a question, maybe Anissa has a question. We have youth from Guam and from the Marshall Islands as well. So go ahead, friends. Let's hear from one of the youth from the islands if they have a question for Mr. Dunbar. And I can't see all of you, so please go ahead and turn on your mic and speak up.
Ali from Belau people. Currently, I don't have a question, but can I just use this time and just and say it's so lovely to see everyone. I see Richard and Betty and Jenny and the boys. Oh my gosh, Uncle David. It's my heart is very like happy right now. It's really, I'm really happy to see everyone. But also Mr. Dunbar, I met you once or twice in the Holy Land. I was very lucky or privileged. I attended your last class at the Holy Land. Yeah, everybody, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm so happy to see everyone.
Thank you. Nice to greet you.
Thank you, Anissa. Anissa is referring to a regular Thursday class that Mr. Dunbar held in the World Center for the Friends, studying a variety of texts and documents of the faith for decades. And Anissa apparently was there at the end before Mr. Dunbar retired and then transferred his residence to California. So that was very special, Anissa. Anissa is speaking to us from the island of Koror in Palau, the Republic of Palau. Let's see if any of the friends from Yap have a question. I see, Sophia, you have a bunch of youth around you. Do either yourself or the youth have a question? Feel free, or a comment or a thought you want to share. Please feel free. And you're on mute, Sophia, just to remind you, you're on mute. This is a gathering that we might feel a little shy talking, but I know Fiona is not shy, so maybe Fiona could come close to the mic. And Guam is next, so the youth on Guam, get ready. We've got Jonia and Jale and Christian and a bunch of other youth on Guam. So we're coming east, friends. So please prepare yourselves. So while we're waiting for the friends in Yap, maybe I ask Deidre from Marshall's to go ahead and unmute yourself, Deidre, and you can ask a question. There's a bit of an audio issue. You want to try again? We've got a room full of youth in Majuro, if you can see. You want to try taking yourself off mute again and see if that...
They might have more than one device.
Right. If you have more than one device in the same room, you're going to get that feedback. Friends? So maybe turn off all other devices and just leave the one on. The friends in Majuro, can you hear me?
Can hear you, Counselor.
Do you want to ask a question?
Sorry, we have two devices here.
That's what the problem is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it sounds better now. Sultan, if you could just take one device out of the room and just leave the other device in the room so we can not get that feedback. Go ahead, Sultan. You can take yourself off mute.
Sorry. That feedback, even though.
We're all learning. We're all becoming technical experts here. So there can only be one device in a room at a time.
Okay, we've turned off everything except for one.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
But,
yeah.
You know,
Fantastic.
the youth have been engaged in some form of teaching activity at the neighborhood, and they had some questions that they couldn't really answer when they met with a reverend from a church.
Fantastic.
They called them to share with them the teachings of the faith, because they found that they were in the neighborhood recruiting youth. So the reverend called them to share the teachings of the faith. So I'll give to John Anian, who is one of the youth in Ryrick, who was actually called to share the teachings of the faith. And he has one question that he wasn't able to answer from the reverend.
Yahweh.
He'll speak in Marshallese and
That's
Sultan
fine.
will translate.
That's fine. Feel free to speak in your own language, friends. Correct.
Okay. Yahweh, say your name.
Nar kadaginu dunia regagiro karpet itu gitu nih tani nih ngejeboy mit apa jangan bergerak lo murah tidak lagi ini kan ini juga boleh.
We were called to explain the faith to one of the reverends at the church in our neighborhood. And one of his questions was, if we haven't accepted Christ in our life, how do we know that we're going to live in heaven with God? So that was the first question.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there another question, friends, or should we turn it to Mr. Dunbar? You can ask 2 or 3 questions if you would like.
One of the second question was, if we say that the Baha'i faith is the true religion for today, but the Bible said that without Christ you cannot go to heaven, to God, because in the Bible says Christ says, "I am the way and the only way." I think that was the other question.
That's a wonderful question. Mr. Dunbar?
Yeah, this requires thinking about our own teachings, because we say the reality of the manifestation of God, they have a twofold character. Now, whether you can get the Reverend to listen to that or not, I don't know. But one is that they have a holy dimension, and it's the same in all of them. So if you've accepted Christ, you've also accepted the other messengers of God, although you may not know the content of their message, but the reality that they're true is there. And for a person to become a Baha'i, he has to recognize and take as divine the Christ. So the Baha'is are teaching Christianity to Jews, to Muslims, to Buddhists that otherwise haven't recognized him and might not recognize him. Now, the recognition is not limited to the scope of the way the one revelation describes it, because they're describing it for the time that they're in. The truth of Christ saying, I'm the way, I'm the life, and so on. This is quite true. And the Baha'is affirm it. But the same voice that said that can repeat that I am Jesus the way Muhammad said at one point. He said, I am Jesus, I'm all the prophets. Very confusing if you don't know this explanation from the Book of Certitude that says that there's a twofold nature. And one is a single voice, and then they also have their own voice that speaks the message of God for the day in which they lived. It's always a challenge. You know, all of you there know about speaking to Christians who got a fixed opinion and they're not ready to listen to anything else. But you have to tell them that they're required by duty because of the content of the New Testament. Christ would not have spoken about the test of how to judge whether a prophet is good. He wouldn't have said that you have to judge them by their fruits. If there were no prophets to come, he would have said, nobody's coming, forget about it. But he didn't say that. He said, this is the way you can tell. So that means that, yes, there will be false prophets, but there's a way to test them and let them test take those factors from the New Testament and apply them to the Baha'i teachings. Besides this glorious vision of the oneness of all these religions, that they all pulse with the same life. They're all coming to life again. We've infused them in new vigor into the followers of these previous religions that have become Baha'is. Those of you that have come from a Christian background, most of the Baha'is will be testifying, I understand Christ so much better now that I'm a Baha'i than I did when I was a Christian.
Thank you, Hooper. This was a question my parents had on their mind back in the 1960s when they were studying the faith. And they were coming to that study from a Christian background in love with Christ. And that journey of understanding and embracing Christ in his fullness in terms of the unity of the manifestations was important. Friends, we have a question from dear Jaleh from Guam, who, you know, one of the great bounties of the faith is these children from parents from different parts of the world. And Jaleh's parents, one is from Iran, who came to Guam as a pioneer and married a Chamorro woman, an indigenous woman here from the Marianas. And dear Jaleh has just become a mother for the first time herself. So Jaleh has a question. Jaleh June.
Aloha, friends, and Mr. Dunbar. So you were saying earlier how the greatest gift that we have is teaching, and that we can teach to our friends. And so given the current situation that we're in now, I'm just wondering, how does social action look like on an online platform, if you have any ideas?
No, I think you're the pioneers of that. You people are the pioneers. The young ones that are doing this have to figure out how to do it. And it's a similar sharing that, again, that what you're talking about is based, you may give some ideas from the Baha'i teachings that fit in with the social understanding or address solutions, you know, for social problems. And then you say these are derived from the guidance of Baha'u'llah, who Baha'is believe is the messenger that God has sent in this time that we live in to resolve these problems. We can't be too shy about saying those things. I mean, we need to have faith in it and to go ahead and do it. and not do it defensively and not do it expecting that they're going to hit us on the head. There's with confidence and trust, this is why we say our prayers. This is why we study the writings, so that we more and more we have confidence in the truth of what we're saying. We penetrate it. It understands us. It uses us.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Thank you, Jale, for your question. Friends, are there other young people in the Marianas, in the Carolines, in the Marshalls that have a thought or a question they want to share? Or shall we open it up to the older youth that are on the call as well?
The senior youth.
The senior youth that I'm sure have many questions as well. Do we have a question from Yap? Friends, we've not heard from Yap. And I don't want to leave Yap out. Or put them on the spot either. It's okay if you don't have a question. Okay, we'll come back to you if you have a question. Oh, somebody opened up. Go ahead, friends.
There he is.
Hello. Oh. Hello.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Dunbar. My name's Christian. I just wanted to know, how's retirement after all the? How are you doing, and how is retirement after all the service you've done? And do you feel fulfilled in knowing that you've done and affected so many people in your life through the teachings of the faith?
Well, it's not easy being a former house member, because when you're there at the heart of the faith, you hear everything from everywhere, the news and so on. Sometimes it gets a little isolated here. But I tell you that the result of that is it's driven me back into the teachings, into the study of the writings, that for some years in the middle of my services, I was very not able to study very much. And except so that my main outlet for teaching there was gathering with the youth once a week. I had some other classes too, but when we first came to the World Center, I'd been so used to giving talks and doing things, but there was nobody really to teach. We had the Hands of the Cause there. I'm not going to give a class for the Hands of the Cause. I was taking classes from them. But after about 10 years, it switched and youth started arriving, and then they needed generally the encouragement. And we studied again. The dispensation was one of the things we studied every year. So it's I'm content right now. I mean, I'm speaking with more people every day than I ever did when I was traveling, because of the Zoom, and then the recordings of the Zoom, and then the recordings are listened to by other people. So it's a miracle. You say your prayers, raise my voice in great assemblies, and then you'd find out that your little study class, 1,500 people have listened to it. What kind of study class is that? I mean, we never had anything like that before. It's amazing.
Friends, a few years ago, I had the bounty of flying up and spending 3 days with Mr. Dunbar in his home. And it had been quite a while since I had seen him face to face. And so I was so excited. And a friend of mine from Canada flew down, and the two of us who were youth back in the 1980s with Mr. Dunbar in the Holy Land, we were so excited to be with him and have him all to ourselves for a couple of days, and thought we would just sit back and, drink some coffee together and talk and watch a couple good movies or something. And after about 10 minutes of arrival and saying hello and catching up on our families, Mr. Dunbar said, "All right, what are we going to study?" And I thought, what do you mean? We ended up reading and studying the entire Promised Day Has Come, this letter from the Guardian, over 3 days. And then he drove me back to the airport and said, "See you later." So that was my visit to Mr. Dunbar. is just constant study and really delving so deeply into the revelation of our faith. So friends, maybe we open it up now to others. I think Gary Clegg from California had a question. Gary? You'll have to take yourself off mute, Gary. We can't hear you, Gary. You're on mute?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
I've been thinking so much about dreams, Mr. Dunbar, and I've enjoyed your profound talks on the immortality of the soul. And I lost a son about a year ago. And as a Baha'i, I've been a Baha'i for many years. And I always thought I had a handle on life after death. But when my son passed away, I began to doubt that there was another plane of existence. And upon hearing some of your talks on the immortality of the soul, I began to dive in deeply into the other realm. And I just got to the point where I can almost feel that I'm in both realms simultaneously. And I just want to say that you've helped me tremendously with the knowledge of that other realm. And also the concourse on high and the fact that when you teach, that they come to your assistance. But I just wanted to share one thing on the dream. And I'm not teaching, I don't think, I'm trying to share something that does not come from the Baha'i writings, but it comes from ancient India. And it's something that really, after my son passed away, burned into my brain, so to speak. And may I share it?
Please.
It was written by an ancient teacher, ancient yogi. And he said, just as the dream becomes unreal in the waking state, and the waking state becomes unreal in the dream, so also death becomes unreal in birth, and birth becomes unreal in death. And to me, that sums up my understanding of the dream.
There's an affirmation in the writings of the Imams. He says, I think it's quoted in the Baha'i writings too, is that the true believer lives both in this world and the next. Simultaneously, we exist in both. If we have the life of the kingdom in our souls, we're already participating in what is the nature, the essence of the afterlife. So the contemplation of these kinds of sayings and meditate upon them certainly opens the doors to transcendent understanding.
Thank you.
Friends, it would be nice to also connect with Kwajalein, that is on with us, the friends from Kwajalein. Julia, don't get too excited. Julia's in Oklahoma now and very excited to see her brothers and sisters in Kwajalein. We've got Agnes as well as Pedro. Friends from Kwajalein, do you have any thoughts or reflections to share with us? Agnes?
Slow connection in you guys, Kurt. But aloha to everyone. It's very nice to see everyone. Very uplifting and very it's a motivation. Been listening to the talk and no words to express how happy to see everyone online. It's a very new thing to do a fireside online to us. Thank you, Mr. Dunbar.
You're most welcome.
From the quadrant.
Thank you, Pedro.
I'm sure Agnes have
Thank you, Pedro. We have one family on Guam that is originally from Gujigu, from Kwaj Atoll. And one of those dear daughters, Julia, now lives in Oklahoma with her husband. Any other thoughts or questions, friends, from different parts of Micronesia or different parts of the world? It's 11:45 here on Guam. We have about 15 more minutes, and we also have a few prayers to conclude our session with Mr. Dunbar and sharing our love with him. Any other thoughts or questions, friends? Feel free. Yeah, Freddie is Freddie's from Majuro and now lives in Arkansas of all places after 5 years of service at the Baha'i World Center as a gardener. And he's now in Arkansas. Yes, Freddie, welcome. Take yourself off mute.
Hello, what dear friend? Hello. Good to see everyone also. I probably like, I was listening to the docs, and one thing that really stuck in myself right now is, I'm meeting friends, and Mr. Dunbar was saying that, you should tell them about the message that we know. So I think it's something that, we all should remind ourselves every time that we meet a new friend every day, probably. And we, like, every people have, like, I don't know many friends. So I mean, I don't know, it's just come to me, and I'm just probably need to put into action. And that's it was really nice to join this evening and to get some learning, and that we can all like take back to our community. So I'm just very happy to see everyone, to listen to the beautiful evening that we all have. And I don't know what other to say, really, no word can explain. That was an amazing evening with you all. Just halapa. And I also want to, probably we didn't talk about it during the talk, but I just curious to know, like, more about a coherent life. If Mr. Dunbar have anything to say about, to say with all of us, will be appreciated. And I think that's all I just want to share.
I missed one of the words. Can you just state the question again, Freddie? I didn't understand part of it, so.
I just want to, if you can talk a little bit about a coherent life. If
I'm missing that word. The what? Thank you. A coherent life, living a coherent life.
Coherent life.
Thank you, Freddie. Such an important question, and this is an area that Mr. Dunbar used to talk a lot to us when we were young. So he can go on for hours on this topic. Yes, Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, I think, it takes a while for us to put the faith first. Now, obviously, you've been years serving the cause in the World Center, and so you've put the faith first. And you've had the access to the shrines and the wonderful experiences of the World Center, I'm sure, have transformed you. So there is a coherence. I mean, it's not always easy to integrate with the old world order because it's very different from the standards and everything, that what people like and what people want to do. It separates us in a sense at times, unfortunately, but that if we are aglow with the enthusiasm of the cause, I think it overcomes those differences and attracts people to another way of seeing things. Again, it's the question of being involved in delivering the message. We have this promise of divine confirmations if we deliver the message. We're told in the teachings that if we don't deliver the message, the confirmations are cut off. We have no confirmations. Without confirmations, how are we going to grow spiritually? That's why it's the greatest gift of God. Teaching is the greatest gift of God. It's for us, it's the greatest gift. It's very nice for the other people if they hear it and believe it, but it's really important for us that we don't slack at all in delivering the message. Then Baha'u'llah can use us, and he moves people around. He moves them like chess pieces, and suddenly you're talking to receptive, waiting souls. Does he want us to talk to a waiting soul if we're going to talk about the Baha'i faith with no enthusiasm or something? That's not going to be interesting to anybody. When you hear Baha'is say, well, I try to teach the faith, but nobody's interested. Friends, usually that means we are not interested enough. We're not in love with it enough to communicate it. We need to go back to our prayer books and beg forgiveness of God for our short vision and take another step to share it. Then he moves people into our path miraculously. We have to trust that the closer we get, the Shoghi Effendi told May Maxwell when she was in the Holy Land with Ruhiya Khanum, that the closer we get to Baha'u'llah, the more mysterious our actions become. Because we're being guided, there's not always good sense to what we're doing. It's because we are impelled, we feel, and we learn trust in that kind of guidance. It's challenging, but that's coherence with the things we can't really understand. We wish we could better, and we do, of course. As we practice them, they become clear. Anyway, this is all my own nonsense.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Friends, we have people in Kwajalein and Majuro that have more questions. So maybe we ask the two questions together. We ask Agnes first from Kwajalein, and then Marcin. So Agnes first. If you could take yourself off mute, Agnes. She's in a room full of friends, friends of the faith that have a question. Agnes? Oh, did we lose her? Agnes, I see you there. You want to take yourself off mute? Agnes? Do you know how to do that, Agnes? I'm trying to see if I can help. Okay, we come back to you, Agnes. We go to Marcin in Majuro.
Okay, everyone. Kirk, can you hear me?
Yes.
Everyone?
Yes.
Okay, look at them. It's a very honor to be with you all today. I'm very happy then to meet electronically with everyone, and especially then Dunbar, Mr. Dunbar. So I have a question. Since Gert mentions that we can ask any kind of question, I'm gonna ask a question on behalf of the all the people of the Republic of the Marshall Islands. And before I ask you the question, I'm gonna read a letter that was written to all individuals on behalf of the Shoghi Effendi. And I read right now, it says, If the Baha'is want to be really effective in teaching the cause, they need to be much better informed and able to discuss intellectually, the present condition of the world and its problem. We need Baha'i scholars, not only people far more deeper away of what our teaching really are, but also well-read and well-educated people capable of correlating our teaching to the current thoughts of the leaders of the society. So I have a question, and this one is concerning of the COVID-19 that we're facing right now in the RMI. And as we all know, we have a question of either bringing in the marginalized people from the affected world, like the U.S. and all the other world, the state and nation, or other prefer to have the border closed down and wait until there is like until we have further instructions from the other countries in regard to the situation if we have like slow down of the contagion. So as we know, even RMI is a free COVID-19 nation right now, and we're in questions of either bringing the people affected, the people from the affected countries, or still closing down the border. So what is your thought on that, Mr. Dunbar? More. Thank you.
You know,
go ahead.
That's a political question, and I wouldn't have anything to say about it. It's a very, very dicey area to pronounce anything on.
One of the wonderful bounties that we have in many of the islands of the Pacific right now is they are COVID-free. Guam is not, but the other islands in Micronesia are. And so the big question is, because there are many people that haven't come home yet, and they're wanting to come home to these islands. And the government is really torn between trying to do everything they can to protect the home island and recognizing that once they start opening themselves up, they increase the risk. So it is a difficult time. But, you know, unlike the past, a few years ago, when we didn't have this technology, we're able to connect with our friends and family that are not with us physically. And that's one of the great bounties of having COVID during this time, where we're still able to connect just like we are today. So that's a wonderful bounty to have. But thank you, Marcin, for those thoughts. I think we're all kind of feeling that way. Let's see if Agnes, friends, has been able to figure out how to share. Agnes, are you able to share with us? Agnes in eBay?
Kirk, I asked her to, I called her and she said they're having a slow connection. So I asked if you could just type in the message you the question.
Right. That's true. That's true. We have one question, friends, from Helen, who actually asked a question, I think the first question at the very start. And I don't know if Helen wants to ask it directly herself, but her question on the chat was to explore the stations of the manifestations of God. That was a question she had. Helen, would you like to elaborate on that? Helen Martel? Okay. I think she's left. She's had to leave. Okay, friends, is there any other questions that we have or thoughts? We're coming to a 2-hour mark, and I don't want to extend it too long for not only Mr. Dunbar, but for the other friends as well who might have other responsibilities. If I don't see any pressing hands raising, we're going to ask Aziz and Julia to sing for us in all the different, or many, not all, there are hundreds of languages in Micronesia. But we're going to ask our two dear souls from Guam who are living in Oklahoma now to sing for us a prayer in the different languages of Micronesia. So I turn it over to Julia and Aziz.
Kirk.
Yes?
I think Aziz had a question.
Do you have a question, Aziz?
I do, but there is some constraints on time, so it's okay.
No, it's okay. You can ask a question and we can hear Mr. Dunbar's final thoughts before the prayer. That's fine.
I'm so sorry. Aloha.
Aloha.
This is such an honor. I just had a small question. I'm kind of nervous, but the talks we listen to, your talks we listen to in the morning, they're like our spiritual coffee, and we wake up to it. And we don't drink actual coffee, but that's the analogy I can think of when listening to your voice. It's like the spiritual coffee that prepares us for this day. And one of the concepts you mentioned is this beautiful concept. And if I remember correctly, you're sharing that the guardian shares that the faith is maintained by activities, but only grows through sacrifice. And this is something that's going throughout my head throughout the day, of thinking about the activities happening and how do I continuously sacrifice in order for growth to occur. And that's a very small question. Is I feel that many of the spirit of the teachings share this concept, but I was wondering if you had the source of where the guardian shares that, because I'd really love to look into it and view the context in which the guardian shared that in. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz.
I don't have anything in front of me now, text, but I can tell you there's one particular letter of the guardian where he's talking about sacrifice. And he says it's of three kinds, the sacrifice that we make in the cause, and all of them are necessary. The first, he said, is financial sacrifice. We should be generous in our contributions to the financial needs of the cause and help one kind of sacrifice. Then he says there's another sacrifice that is challenging for us. It's the sacrifice of our time. We all have allotted, so many hours a day to this, and we do that, and I don't know, we're going to do our bicycling, and we're going to do our gym, and we're going to do this and that. What kind of time do we dedicate to the cause? Sacrifice of our hours, of our day, of our time. And that sacrifice, as the guardian said, the first duty of the Baha'is is to study and to teach. Study and teach. The two things go together. If you don't study, you don't have enough content to keep talking on and attracting confirmations. He calls us to both those tasks. All right. Then the third sacrifice, what's that going to be after our money is gone, our time is gone, now what else do we have to give? He says the third one is yourself. The goals of yourself. The things you think you want to do with your life that you're putting before dedicating yourself to the cause. This is very challenging, Your person. You sacrifice your person. What I think I want to be in the world and who I should be and all that kind of thing. We need to have those three dimensions of sacrifice present. And then in all of the letters that he writes about action, he talks about his steadfastness, steadiness in service. we say, why do we have prayers for steadfastness and constancy? When I'm a believer, I accept the faith, I proclaim the faith, I love the faith. Why do we have to say that? But part of it is because those prayers act as a protection. They ward off the whisperings of the evil one, who's constantly whispering in one of our ears all kinds of interesting things to do that would be so enjoyable, but it's not according to the law, and so you can't kind of contemplate it. But sometimes you have vain imaginings about it, about something you want to do that is not permitted. Whereas the use of the prayers and having the divine verses and the use of the greatest name, it wards off the undue influence of the lower nature of man, which has been characterized as the host of the evil one that's whispering to us. It's our own animal nature that's whispering to us and giving us things to do. I don't want to go on too much about that, but it's a very important subject. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Thank you, Aziz, for the question. Friends, we have one last pressing question, and we're going to take it from a youth, Samoan youth, who now lives in New Zealand. So we'll end with the southernmost of the Pacific Islands asking a question. Dear Lizzie, if you could ask your question, that would be wonderful. And then we'll close with 2 prayers, friends.
Alapa friends, Alapa, Mr. Dunbar. I don't know if I have a question, but I'm trying to contain my joy. I'm just a bit nervous now. I just wanted to share how much one of the phrases in one of the junior youth texts has really come into reality. The phrase is in Glimmerings of Hope. The phrase is our knowledge is tested in the field of service. And it takes me back to thinking about our first study of Book 5 in 2012, of how when we studied Book 5, we would just study all the units of Book 5 from Unit 1 to Unit 3. And now that our knowledge has progressed year after year, our study of Book 5 has now, our knowledge of Book 5 has now widened, and our understanding has advanced. Now that our study of Book 5 is, when we study Unit 1, we would think of a service component that goes along with. And us staying here in New Zealand and thinking of the condition of the world is, we've gone through a series of lockdowns, and it has slowed down our activities. I just wanted to ask a question, whether you, Mr. Dunbar, whether you have anything to share about how we could still empower youth to serve in this condition, and how can we strengthen the 3 protagonists in ensuring this to happen. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you.
Lovely, yes, lovely. Well, I think it's going on with just everything that you've mentioned that you're doing, and keeping in touch with locally. I know they say it's hard to get the youth to come online for some of the junior youth activities. That they have other things they want to be looking at and watching, and so it's a bit of a challenge. That's a bit of a challenge. But as soon as you're able to have live meetings, observing social distancing and so on, it's good to help to have have new meetings, fresh meetings with the junior youth and the people in groups that you've been dealing with, and trying to get them online also, even if it's just for some social chit chat, keeping them engaged, keeping them alive.
And Mr. Dunbar, this question that Lizzie asked about how one's understanding of the revelation progresses over time as one makes these efforts to deepen, to apply, to live the life. to delve deeper. One's appreciation, one's understanding is enhanced over time.
That's a good question for you to answer, Kirk. You've been doing it.
I'm still trying to find the first valley, so I don't. These young people are on a different level than me.
Get a horse.
Mr. Dunbar, do you have any final thoughts for the friends before we close with our devotions? And friends, there's some chat, there's some back and forth in the chat about Mr. Dunbar's shirt. Everybody's so impressed with your shirt, Mr. Dunbar.
Ah, that has a story. This shirt was given to me by Kirk in Hawaii. It's from Fiji, and it's. I thought I better put this on instead of a shirt and tie, so we could at least have some breakthrough here between all of us. Lovely to be with you. I can't say anything except that I just feel so much your love, and it makes me very happy to see all of you. This is usually in the class, you know, I don't see these panels with anybody's face. So I'm sitting there speaking to myself for an hour. It's a bit difficult. But here I have a chance to see you smiling, and I just appreciate so much all of you. We're going to have prayers, I guess, now.
Yes, yes.
I'd love to say goodbye from now, and then we'll have our prayers and go our way.
So, Mr. Dunbar,
I have a other Zoom meeting right now at 7 on racism, which is a big subject at present in the United States, and a lot of panel discussions and things, which is what this thing is tonight.
So thank you, Mr. Dunbar, for taking your time and a whole more than 2 hours with us. It's really such a bounty, and we share a lot of the Pacific love to you and to your dear wife and your son and your health for many years to come. We appreciate you so much for taking the opportunity. So a big aloha and half a day from Guam.
Thank you so much for arranging this and giving me the opportunity to see so many of you. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Friends, we're going to end with a prayer from Aziz and Julia, and then from the youth in Majuro.
Guide me and protect me. Illumine the lamp of my heart and make me a brilliant star. Thou art the mighty and the powerful. Oh, Anastasia. Imka man way swani surana we wakajo we wakmero okotem weri mama sai asara maname netite ewini engeri efufumisa emi takia opataku oh Dios mokrola emorila emilala mapal doidi ekulinya Kau yang masisi mengaraklisi. Oh God, guide me and protect me. Illumine the lamp and make me a brilliant song. Thou art the mighty and the powerful.
Okay, thank you very much. Allah Akbar to everyone, and on behalf of the youth, we would like to thank everyone, Kirk, Councillor Johnson, and everyone, our dear friends that joined in the Zoom, and also Mr. Dunbar for the very enlightening and encouraging sharing of the teachings of the faith. As you know, that most of these youths are all new to the faith, and the talk this afternoon really touched their heart. So they would like to share a prayer by Baha'u'llah in a song that they composed from praise and gratitude. So thank you very much.
Thank you, dear youth from Madro. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, dear friends. That was gorgeous. Again, thank you, Mr. Dunbar, and thank you, friends from all over the Micronesia, the Pacific, and all over the world. We look forward to seeing you all in person when we travel and visit each other. Thank you, Sabine. You can all go visit Sabine and stay with Sabine in Seattle. She's extended an invite. So Sabine, get ready. We're all coming to your house when COVID is over. Aloha, friends.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you so much.
Aloha, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mayor Rivera. Thank you for being with us for the whole session. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.